And so I went to art high school in DC, and my teacher, one of my painting teachers, introduced me to Rothko. And I really liked how they talked about color and how he wanted you to feel some emotion from the color. And just, I've always been really interested in color, and so I fell in love with that. And I was doing these landscapes, and I would like leave school and go home and watch Bob Ross on YouTube and just paint a bunch of landscapes. And like going through some of those images, I realized that like I've always been really interested in like poetry and words and titles, and like trying to get some type of feeling or communicate like an emotion I had through words also along with the paintings. I was probably like 15 or so here, so I'm not going to read any of those gems, but they were there. And so I was doing the landscapes at home mostly, and then at school, I was more interested in like the Rothko thing and like being abstract and having like this dark purples and reds, and again, trying to get across this like sort of feeling I had. Then the same teacher showed this documentary called The Power of Art, and I think it's on YouTube now, and they talked about Caravaggio, and it was very dramatic how he explained his life and how they talked about like the paintings weren't really about Jesus and anything. It was really more about like his life in Rome, but it was just a way to talk about what was going on around him. And I liked also how he covered up Jesus and like pointed the light onto like the regular everyday people. And I remember seeing that and I was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to like put my friends and family into paintings and talk about my life as well. And this painting particularly stayed with me for a while, where he was like on the run for murder, and in order to get a pardon, he like made this painting, and he was like basically that's his self-portrait, and he was like offering up his head, and he was like asking for forgiveness, and I just always thought that was like very powerful, and just thinking about like, could painting like save someone? So I don't want to stay on that too long, but so after I saw those paintings, I had only been painting landscapes and those abstract things. One of my teachers recommended taking some figure drawing classes, and so I started taking these figure drawing classes after school at this place called the Washington Studio School, and then I decided to try to combine what I was drawing there with the landscapes and those abstract images. So that's where these came. And then I kind of left that behind and decided to paint people, and that's me. And I had like a book where it said, you know, use black and white to like learn how to like paint and do the form first before you like jump into color. It's too confusing. But I decided to use purple and white just because of the color thing. And then after that one there, now I'm like I went to community college for 2 years, and for like a couple months I stopped painting because I felt like I wasn't getting it, and I decided to just learn how to draw, and so I did a couple drawings. And it's kind of taking like these biblical stories and just putting myself and like friends and family in it. And that's self-portrait. And then with this painting is pretty much a copy of the David and Goliath that Caravaggio did. And it's just me, and I did myself as the David and the Goliath, and I was just sort of thinking about how I feel like I had both of those things in me, and like this struggle, and just trying to figure out like who I am, where I belong, and all that stuff. And while up at DC, there was this Rembrandt painting was up all the time growing up there. And I remember going to look at it and seeing like all these little pieces of color in the face, and not being able to translate that into my skin tone, but it was something that I was always interested in, like trying to bring out this color in my flesh. And then so I started painting again, just taking Caravaggio paintings and putting myself in them. And at this point, I'm like a pretty private, shy person, and I think it just took me a while, but a lot of times at school, people are like, oh, this painting, what's this about? And I'm like, oh, it's just Caravaggio, it's just this biblical story, it has nothing to do with me, but eventually, later on, that kind of comes in. And now I'm in undergrad, and while I'm in undergrad, I have like a bunch of YouTube talks, and there was one where Kara James Marshall was talking about how he wanted to make the figure as dark as he could and pull out like the variations of color that was within black, like cools and warms, to like create form. And I didn't have the words for it at the time, but hearing him explain what he was doing helped me begin to articulate and like understand what I was chasing, which was I was interested in pulling out all the like reds and purples and golden tones that I saw in flesh. But I wasn't consciously thinking about it. I just knew that what I was doing wasn't what I was after. Like the image I was making wasn't quite what I was after. But after seeing this and listening to him talk, helped me like figure out what I was chasing. And this is like cropped funny, but this is a self-portrait. And I took a weekend workshop class, and this is the first time I used oil painting as an indirect method, and started with putting like a yellow glaze down and then slowly letting the next layer dry to sort of build up luminosity. And that this becomes like a big part of my practice. Self-portrait. Oh, okay, so this is a show I like. I don't know if anybody knows this, Fullmetal Alchemist. I like watched it growing up, and apart from like the storytelling, which I'm very interested in, like how they connect something that happened a long time ago and shows like how it's affecting the people today and like the current lives of everyone. And they also had this philosopher's stone, which was like this bright red color, and like for me that always like represented life, and I really fell in love with this color. It's like something I use all the time. And I started, instead of using the yellow ground, I used like, you can see from like the wine glass, I was using like this red underneath and letting that shine through in the skin, and that felt like closer to what I was trying to achieve. This is a triptych I did. And this image here will come up again later. It's like pulled from a Rembrandt painting. And then while I was in undergrad, Eric Fischel had a retrospective, and listening to him talk about his paintings and how they were how they were talking about his life and how he grew up, and him trying to understand where he came from and how all those things affected him, sort of planted a seed in me, and like also gave me like a little courage to eventually be able to do something like that. And so that talk. And another show that happened while I was there was Norman Lewis, an abstract painter, and I fell in love with like his colors, and these colors stay with me. And then another artist, Henry Ossawa-Tana, also had a show there while I was there. I was pretty lucky to have like all these different shows there while I was in school over those 3 years. It really influenced what I was doing today. And then after that, this is like my senior show in undergrad. I decided to like sort of paint some people in my life and like remove from like a religious story, just people I know and environments that I knew, still like shying away from any like content. But these were like images I had. I left out something very important. So going all the way back to the drawing I did of me with the charcoal holding my head. And right before that, I went to the doctor, and they long story short, they thought I like had cancer. I didn't, but it took them like a couple months to figure it out. And I remember around that time, like I thought I was dying, and I didn't want to do anything else. And so besides paint, and I just remember for like those 3 months, I realized that like painting was important to me, and like I felt like I hadn't done anything with my life, and I wanted to like tell stories about everyone I knew and things that happened to me and like people around me. And so I just held up in the basement for 3-4 months and painted all those images earlier. And so this was also from around that time. My grandfather had got sick, and so some of these images was from then. And so now I'm about to graduate, and I had a teacher named Vincent Desiderio, and he did this painting, and I felt like I wanted to copy it. And I never painted a big painting before, and my idea before it was to have everything that has influenced me up to this point, everything I disliked and everything I liked, that I felt contributed to how my images looked. And I remember like being up all night and like dreaming about this painting and like trying to figure it out. I had this one dream where I saw my teacher and I asked him how, I was like, I can't figure out how to finish this painting, how do you do it? And he said, oh, don't worry, I'll tell you. All you have to do is, and then I like woke up. But anyway, so I did this, and this is the painting I did. So I had like every teacher I ever had, every painting I ever looked at, and like some friends and everything. And another thing about this painting that I didn't know at the time, but the size of the figures and the people felt right to me, because I ended up later understanding that I like for you to feel like you're a part of the image. And so size, this was like the first time like I felt like you can like walk into it and you were there. And then at the same time, this is a Delacroix painting. So when previously a lot of my way I would paint was based on thinking about Caravaggio and light. And when you have like a strong light source, the color of the flesh is like deeply influenced by that. So it'll become yellow, and then the shadows kind of take over the other side. And so you don't really get a lot of color of the actual thing. And my teacher one day was reading like from Delacroix's journal, and he said, lights and shadows should be like mere accidents, basically saying you shouldn't really see them, and then like everything else should just be like the color of the form. And so like here you don't really see it, you just get like a lot of different colors of like whatever the object is or the animal. And I just remember thinking like, oh, I wonder if I can combine really strong colors and the same darks and lights and shadows from Caravaggio. And so I kind of planted a seed for that. And so now I'm in grad school, and yeah. And then after this painting, I am still pretty disappointed with my like flesh tones, and so I stopped painting people, which it felt like forever, but it was probably only like 3 months. But I remember at the time, I'm like, I'm just not gonna paint people anymore. And so I had one assignment where we had to go to the Met and draw a sculpture. And a lot of my training up to this point has been like European sculptures and like learning anatomy and all the muscles. And so I like immediately went there and I just drew. I can't remember what I drew. And then I had like all this time left. And I found myself in the Egyptian section, and I drew something there. And then I was like, oh, I actually never drew anything outside of like, I guess like Western art. And I kind of fell in love with like how they handled form. And so I started painting these images and sculpture. Is there a way to, that's not like to like make that smaller? Okay, it's okay. So basically, is that me? Oh, so yeah, now I'm just trying to click to the.
Well, let me try because it seems like this image is blown up for some reason.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, cool, thank you. So I had started putting these sculptures in my paintings, and at the time I was really interested in like science and technology, and I was thinking about how these people or cultures, ancient cultures, had used sculptures to describe the world around them, and how we were using, I was in grad school, and how we was using technology to do that, and I just wanted to like have these two things together, and that's what I kept doing for a little while. And this here is like that Caravaggio painting. And then I was at the Brooklyn Museum, and I saw this Egyptian fertility sculpture, and I remember how they talked about how, they said like, the plaque says something about like, even though this is overtly sexual, it's really about birth and death, and it was like some important story about how Horus was reborn, and I really liked that, and so I painted that with me, and I was thinking about birth and death at that time. This is like the last painting I did in grad school, and I remember like I was like walking down the hall, and previously I had met Eric Fischel when he came at PAFA, and he was like walking around, and I saw him, and I like made a joke and said he wasn't doing anything, asked him could he come to my studio. And so he came, and this painting was there. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I remember walked away like thinking like I was like kind of going in the right direction, and also something about like open up more, you know, like talk more about your life or something like that, or like, I can't remember, but it felt inspiring and sort of led me down this road. Why is this here? Oh, so this is Caravaggio again. And so now I'm out of grad school, and this whole time I've been dealing with color and like painting flesh and thinking, okay, this doesn't still look like what I'm seeing. It's not bright enough, it's not colorful enough. And the way I was working was, this is the ground here, that red from Full Metal Alchemist. And I'm layering slowly on top of that with browns and yellows, and I'm still not getting it. And we're getting it how I want it to look. And so I remember one day I'm like at home, and I'm about to start this painting, and I'm thinking about how I was taught to paint like an image like this, where like you make it brighter than it needs to be, because it's easier to darken than it is to lighten. And so then I get the idea to make the painting more colorful than it needs to be, and then add the neutrals later. And so I started with a really bright ground, which was like this orange, and then I was gonna go back and add brown and neutrals on top of it. But when I got to that stage, I was like, oh, this is actually kind of like what I was seeing. And so I just left it like that. And also around this time, this was like the first time I made like a body of work that like kind of had like a theme. And this is what I got notes for. Yeah, so this one, like, so now I'm gonna start probably reading some of the titles of the shows and titles of the paintings. So this was from like a group of paintings called Life Was a Party to Be Thrown. And I was thinking about how I just got out of school, and I don't know, just things just started to feel serious. Like, although I like was working and everything then too, it just felt different, because I guess when I was in school, like I was defined by being a student and not really like whatever job I had. And so I think I was like thinking about that stuff, but at the same time, I started taking like that first sculpture, the last Brooklyn Museum sculpture, and making my own figures based off that. And I wanted to have these figures around that were like influencing the the other figures that were kind of there, but you couldn't really see. And it started with this painting when thinking about my mom and how she would always be kind of worried about certain things that I thought weren't around. And so I felt there was like always things around like influencing like my decisions, my friends, and my mom's. And so this was less like giving a physical form to that. That's me. And then this painting here, the way I started, see like the orange is the ground, and as I'm going, I leave places, and I just, for some reason, this reminded me of a halo, and I was thinking about how I can like further, like bring that out and call attention to it, and so that's when I think after this and the next painting, I started using glitter to highlight that. Yeah, so this is my first glitter painting. I was like tapping it down. It didn't really work right, but eventually later I painted on. Okay, and so that's that group of paintings. And then now it's, I don't know, it's like 2016 or something. And I'm going back home for the first time. And I'm starting to think about like my neighborhood and like where I grew up and all these different feelings of returning home. And what did I call it? So yeah, this show was called The Arena. And just like, it started out as just like this group of paintings, but it became a show. And the way I work is like I'd go from one painting to the next and just sort of follow a thread and see what happens. And so it was like a tour of where I grew up in DC. And this painting, it was called like the Classroom. I just remember being outside on the playground and remembering like all the like lessons I learned there, like how to interact with people, like what to say, what not to say, and a bunch of other things, but not really remembering whatever I learned in school, you know. So I feel like this stuff stayed with me a little more. And towards the end of those paintings, I made this tiny painting of a kitchen of the house I spent like my high school years in. And it led me to the next couple of paintings because after I did this, I was like, I never went inside the house. And so I started thinking about, well, who was in the house, what was going on there, and that led me to like thinking about my grandfather and how he would be in the kitchen. And so I wanted to create like these images of people in a house where you're like walking up on them like in thought. And this is when I like consciously decide to start making like the images about life size so you can feel like you're part of it and just walking into it and interacting with the person. And yeah, and these paintings end up becoming, the title I used for these was My Heart is Like Paper, Let the Old Ways Die. And I was just thinking about heartbreak, like whether it's like romantic or otherwise, and how it can stay with you and like affect your relationships and how you interact with people. And this is the first like still life interior I did. And the way I think about these are also in a way like portraits, because I always felt like you can tell a lot about like a person or what's going on with their life, with like what's in their room, like how their room looks, what's on the dresser and stuff like that. So this is just kind of a painting I did in between, just figuring out the next thing. I was on a residency in Maine, and this is things that I was feeling when I was there. And I also started doing like these sort of, I guess, 16 by 20, just portraits of people that were in my life. And so now I'm turning 30, and I'm just thinking about that. And I just remember feeling like nothing really changed. I was still the same, but like, you know, when you talk to people about it, I don't know, they always make it seem like, oh, it's this big thing, you're turning 30. And so, yeah, these paintings, like this group of paintings was called, I guess by now it's supposed to be a man, but I'm just trying to leave behind yesterday. And I was also thinking about, like when does that happen? When do you become an adult? When do you become a man? Is it, you know, is it at 30? Or I was thinking about times where, like this is like my dad, but my grandfather or my dad like was sick or at the hospital, and like as a child, you know, I looked at them as, like this one is called, I think, All Heroes Get Tired. And I just remember seeing him like kind of scared for the first time, you know? And so I was thinking about that and like, you know, being a man and stuff. And then also like when you leave the house for the first time or get kicked out, et cetera, is that when you're a man? Or, you know, this is me. Or like when you're a child, like when does that happen? You know, like sometimes at early ages, you know, they say things like, oh, you're the man in the house now, stuff like that. So I was just looking at these different ages of life and thinking about, well, when does that happen? Because I still feel like I'm not, you know? Oh, and so this is a Rembrandt painting, that the one I pointed out earlier that I copied, basically. And so at this point, I realized that I've been painting a lot of self-portraits, and from like high school until now, and I started thinking about how Rembrandt had portraits of him as a child until when he died, basically. And so this was like a project I now consciously decided to do. I was like, okay, I'm gonna paint at least 1 or 2 self-portraits a year. And it became this thing where it was interesting to look at like how I painted me, but also like how I looked at myself, how I painted myself, and like what I was thinking about. And now this group of paintings is called, let me look it up here. Oh, yeah, I was looking back at like different times in life where I thought maybe like I made a mistake, or like something that I thought was failure, or something that my friends or my parents had been through that was perceived as failure but really wasn't. And just thinking about how it was just like a part of life, and how you don't really know if it's a mistake or if it's failure till like the end, like till you die, really. And so I think this group of paintings is called, it's called Hey Tomorrow, Do You Have Some Time For Me? Failure is a part of being alive. Yeah. I think this painting is it's called like Kicked Out the House for Living Fast, or something like that. This one's I was on a path to being honest. And I was also thinking about how children can come into your life and like even unexpectedly can end up being like the best thing that ever happened. It's a friend of mine. This one is Sunday morning, I'm too tired to go to church. Grew up before he went through puberty. I can't remember what this one's called. And this is like the first landscape I've done since those one I did in high school. And it was basically after like doing some residencies and things, I started to remember like a time in my life that I forgot about, honestly, where I spent a few years in North Carolina and how peaceful it was. I wanted you to sort of feel like you were there and like contemplating. And oh yeah, so other part was I was also thinking about this painting a little bit, and I wanted to remove the person and like have you become the person staring out. Yeah, and so throughout these years, I'd also been drawing, and to be honest, I'm not like a big fan of drawing. It's like a little too slow for me, and I never really enjoyed it. But so I've been drawing over the years too. But then I remember this drawing I did, I think right after high school. Not this one, but those two with the Conti and the charcoal. And I was like, oh, well, why don't I try to do that? That's similar to like this orange I was using. And so then I just started playing around trying to figure out how to translate what I was painting into drawing. And this was like the first couple attempts at that, just combining the pencil and the Conti. Oh, okay, that jogs my memory. So now this is like, COVID is like kind of over. I can't remember exactly the year, but I felt like I'd said goodbye to a lot of things. Like I changed, I left this neighborhood I was in for like 10 years, and that was like the longest I've ever lived in a place. And yeah, so I was just thinking about that, and then my father had passed away during COVID, and I stopped doing things I was doing previously. And so this like group of paintings was called You Know I Used to Love You, but now I don't think I can. There ain't no right time to say goodbye again. So just thinking about people I say goodbye to and things I say goodbye to, habits, places. Oh, there was a accident. Say goodbye to that car. And this was also like thinking about how like interiors and stuff can like tell a lot about, you know, a person or what's going on in their house, et cetera. And I just remember like looking up one day and all of a sudden like I didn't have any like alcohol around, like my cabinets didn't have any of the same stuff that was there before. And so that was just interesting to me. And that's me. And then I decided to try to go about making a drawing in the same process of the layering that I do with the painting. And so I get paper and I take the same orange that I'm using and I color the paper, and then I reduce the two Contis I'm using to just yellow and I don't know the name, I think sanguine and cadmium or something, and try to make some drawings. And this was called, these group of drawings is A Moment Alone in the Shade, and I was thinking about like just sort of taking a pause and being with people you love and care about and doing things that make you happy. Yeah. And so now we are at, what is this called? Yes. So now I've moved out the city for a little bit, and I've done a few residencies, and like throughout the last couple of years, I've been thinking about landscape and like different times I've been in nature and like felt happy, and all these moments that I didn't really forget about, but didn't think about much. I always considered myself like a city guy or whatever. But my mom's from the South, and I grew up there for a couple years. And so some of these images are from that, and just pulled from other places. And this group of paintings is called "The City Lights Can't Shine Quite Like the Stars." I got so far from my raising, I forgot where I come from. And so I was just thinking about this moment in time that I forgot, and how peaceful nature could be, really. And I also, like with this painting, I start getting interested in like nighttime scenes and trying to figure out how to make a dark painting using really bright colors. And then at this point, I don't really think much about it, but later on, the window kind of becomes this like this metaphor almost for me of like, I don't know, like hope or like something mysterious, like a way out. Oh yeah, and then I also, I think around that year while I was making these paintings, I looked into the telescope, I think for the first time, honestly, and I was just really amazed by it, and so I wanted to recreate that experience. So I got a telescope and just kind of took it apart and added it like on a slant so it looks like it's hanging, and painted it, and I put these stars in there so you can kind of see a constellation. And this one's called Praying to a God That Won't Talk Back, because, I guess that's what we do. And this is now like in between things, what I basically I always just paint whatever comes to my mind and just see where it goes. And this is just some stuff I was working on. And so now, this is like very close to today. What was this called? Oh, yeah, this is called, this group of paintings that was kind of inspired by like this one is, it was called When There's Nothing I Can Do, I Go to My Heart. And I was just thinking about, I guess like moments of like feeling hopelessness and like there's nothing you can do, like, what do you do? And I think it's like, I think start small and like, oh wait, that's out of order. But so anyway, yeah, so that, and then this is the window painting again. I'm thinking more about windows. And so when there's nothing you do, I think like start small, like at home. Like for me, it's like thinking about people I care about, like how I want the world to look for them. And then I feel like then, like, maybe some answers could be found, I think like, how do I want my niece or like my grandmother to live? This is after that. And then now I just wanted to try out some nighttime paintings. And with this group of paintings, I was trying new colors, and I wanted to also create more of an environment. So in the gallery, I painted the walls and everything black and dimmed the lights. And this one is called, this group of paintings is called Times They When I Thought They Would Be, The Stars Don't Shine Like Before. And again, yep, and that's pretty much it. And then I just started doing some drawings, and that leads to today. And across the street, you will see some drawings.
Thank you, Arc.
Thank you.
Before we head over to see the work, we'd love to take some questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone over to you. Hi, can you tell me what the little guy who was repeatedly
Oh, yeah,
shown?
yeah. So that, I used to call them like seekers. I'll probably be able to find one. Wow. Oh, here we go. These guys here? Yeah, so it started with that painting, that sculpture of the Brooklyn Museum fertility sculpture. And eventually, I think another thing that happened is like once I started like getting more specific with like the titles and the themes, I kind of got away from that a little bit. And I think like in the beginning, like that first group of paintings was called like the Arena, and like you can't really, for me, like I think you wouldn't really know what that meant without me explaining it to you. And then I think the further I get, and the more specific I get about what's going on, I feel like I need less things around just sort of like reducing it. Yeah.
Arc, the Rembrandt portraits are so interesting to show alongside your work, and I think he did sort of an excruciating job of painting self-portraits that convey his own sense of fear, is sort of maybe how I interpret it. I also interpret that in some of yours. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of emotional content behind the self-portrait?
For sure. I think for me, like painting has always been a way to like, I guess, talk about things that I never felt like I could, or I was too nervous to. And it's also been a way for me to like connect with people. And I think, yeah, I think that's where that comes from. Like things I didn't really have words for. I think it helped me like understand maybe things I've been through, things other people have been through. And so I think that's where it comes from. I feel like that's important to me. And I think also like storytelling. Yeah.
Hi, Eric. I had a question about your process of pulling the ground forward. And it's compelling, not just process-wise, because I think that's very, I don't know, I'm not a painter, but it feels like that's pretty tricky to do, but also just compelling conceptually, because you're allowing things to be pushed backward, but the background is coming forward. You're not just painting on it, but it actually becomes a positive thing. Can you talk a little bit about how that comes about for you, and how you make those choices about where to pull the background forward?
Yeah, it started with that one painting of with me at the beginning, the last one I did in grad school with the Brooklyn Museum sculpture. And I think in that one I had realized like, oh, I don't have to paint everything the same way. And so it started there with me experimenting on like leaving things. And as I developed, I sort of started thinking about like the space of the painting and how it's not just this way, it's also this way, and like figuring out how I can use each layer to create space. And also, for me, it's like, I lost my train of thought. But also creating space, and I guess also like kind of fun for me to like figure out what's going to be left and what's not, because you asked that. Like, so a lot of times I'll be painting it, and the thing I think I'm going to leave as the ground is something else. And so it's just like listening and like seeing how the colors are working together. And another thing I was going to mention is maybe isn't has anything to do with what you said. But like another thing that happened that I think was very important was when I started out painting, I was like looking at like lights and shadows, and I think just because this is how our eyes are, it's easier to see the differences. But as I started, painting more and more, the like how those colors are similar are just as important. I don't want to say more, but just seeing how the shadows and the lights connect, and how like these colors are similar is important. I don't know. I guess same thing with people.
Well, thank you, Arc. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And anyone who would like to follow us over to the painting building for a reception, please join us. You're welcome.